Welcome to my front-end development lecture. We will be dealing with this agenda today. How does the web works again? A reminder. And then we go and visit the very first website. So we understand actually what the purpose of the web was, at least. Now it has shifted a little bit. And let's have a brief history in the evolution of the web and web applications mostly. So why are we building web applications with focus on the front end the way we do today? Let's start with the first item. How does the web works again? So at the simplest level, you know that you have your computer. Your computer has a browser which you type google.com, for example, and that's actually when you type enter, what you're actually doing is asking a other computer connected to the internet, hey, get me this specific file or resource, better said. And that resource must be, or that file must be somewhere in one computer in the world. If you type google.com, probably those servers are going to be in USA, right? Well, that's called the HTTP request, or simply said the request that you are, sorry for the redundancy, requesting. And then once the server gets that request from your computer, well, it simply is looking for that file. Remember that request is just a file, could be a file. And then I'm going to look into that file, and then I'm going to send it to you, as simple as that. That answer that I'm sending to you, it's called the HTTP response. And looking for this resource is basically very similar to what you do when you are looking at a picture or any file on your computer. So you just go, for example, to your desktop, and then you open all my documents, and then you open a folder, and then you find the said document. So something similar to that, since the web server is a computer somewhere in the world. Now, that's happening at the simplest level. Of course, there are many other requests. It's not only a direct request to the direct server, because your computer just types google.com and that's being translated to a number, the IP number, right? But the only reason we type words is because of, we humans are very bad at numbers, right? So, and we can not memorize so many addresses in terms of numbers. So that's the first translation that occurs. So in the process of requesting and response, there's a lot of other things going on, like DNS servers are in place. And those DNS servers are responsible for identifying, your file is actually, or the resource that you're requesting is in this specific server, in this specific location. Okay, so keep in mind, there's a much more networking, it's called, going on in this approach. But for us, it's very important, these keywords request and response, because when developing the front end in a modern way, you are dealing with APIs. And you will see later on, when you have to use or create API calls, you will deal with responses that contain data in a specific format called JSON. And you have to deal with those API calls or those requests. So that's basically it. Let's look into the very first website. And when you look at the history of the web, well, this is the origin that if you look into this, let's have a look. Let's click over here. And if you expected a little bit a different thing rather than this, what you're seeing now, well, sorry to disappoint you, but this is exactly the first website. Of course, it might not look like a much, but at that time, this was a total breakthrough. And the guy, Mr. Tim Berners-Lee, who was the guy who invented this, the www, was working at the CERN, and he proposed this project called the World Wide Web. At the time, of course, we didn't have browsers, we didn't have web servers, so he had also to create the first web server, the first web browser, and even the protocol, because in his mind, I mean, the hypertext was existing, the internet was existing back then, but he put all these things together. And with this idea of linking documents. So, back in the days, if you need something, it was a bit difficult to just get that something or link that something. So imagine if you're working in a big building, and if you suddenly need a document, then you have to go to the next floor or the top floor, knock the door of somebody's office and request a document, right? That takes some time. So he basically created the hypertext way of linking things. Hypertext by definition is that containing links within the text, which is what you see basically here, all these links. That was his idea. He had to cover many issues. Like I already said, he invented the first web server, the first web browser. And at that time, we only had the TCP and IP protocol. So the internet basically was pretty robust as we know today. But there was no HTTP. So there was no nothing like the hypertext or the resources that we see on the browser whenever you type an address. So he had to invent that. So as I said, he put all these pieces, the level of his thing was so high that he put all these pieces together, the existing pieces, and even created a higher level, that being this hypertext protocol. So and then the web was born. If you want more details about this story, it's a very nice story. I highly recommend you to just Google his name, Tim Berners-Lee, and look into his biography, because he's still very active in terms of the standards in the web. So he's a member of the boards of those standardizations that people from web developers and institutions involved in the web listen to. I leave the sources over here, so you can just jump into it. And as you could see, it was only mainly one objective, clear objective in Tim's mind, and that was linking this documentation, make it accessible, globally accessible, and or universally accessible, and make it available by just clicking here and there. So that was the main purpose when the web was invented. But a curious thing happened since it exploded. Many ingenious people. The technology was advancing. The internet became every time faster and faster. Ingenious people were inventing more technologies, taking advantage of the web capabilities, and then the web apps just appear. And that's great, even though that wasn't never the purpose. Otherwise, I believe a different internet we have today if the web app was taken into consideration. But it wasn't the case. So, and that's one of the reasons, if not the main reason, why in order to create a web application, we need to deal with lots of tools. And even to maintain this, you need to maintain a web application. You need to deal with different tools, deal with different even approaches. And we have a little bit like chaos, so to say, especially if you're new to this world of the web world. So it's like you might find like it's you're really being thrown into the ocean, and it's when you can even swim. So but my task is to guide you through this process step by step, and just looking at the front end level at this point, and with the help of a framework, and that framework is Angular. You will see in a moment why we're using Angular. So what about the evolutions? How did we end up here in terms of web applications? And as I said, sometimes you feel a little bit frustrated because there are too many tools, too many things, too many technologies out there, and you end up a little bit frustrated, or you name it. There is a nice explanation, there is a nice walkthrough, and my presentation is based also on that story. And I leave the reference of this story of the web apps evolution in the end, so you can read more details about what I'm going to tell. So most of the concepts and words that you see here is a front end. If I would have taken into consideration fully back end as well, then it would have been even worse. So, but we are going to focus in this course on front end. So bear with me, please. This is on purpose. This chaotic, cluttered slide. So let's start. The best we can do, let's start in the beginning. By the way, HTML, in the beginning, traditional study websites were only having these technologies, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So as soon as the web was invented, by the way, Tim was also inventing the HTML mark language. So yeah, that was of course part of the whole suite of his project, the web project. But initially we only had these technologies, and that was great, good enough for the early 90s, mid 90s. But as soon as the web popularized, more and more people, more and more companies actually start creating their websites, the demand for dynamism was also growing. Because at this point, let's imagine you at the time, you had a company, you create your awesome website based on these technologies, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then if you had to change your website, what would have been the process? The process would have been, take the HTML, change the content, because the content was in a raw way put in the HTML pages, since the HTML serves for the structure of your document, right? The CSS for the styling of the page, and JavaScript, what I call is the little magic behavior of your website. So if you had to change it, you went to the HTML, open the document, change, put the new content, and use the FTP protocol to update your site, right? Because these were just a set of files. Of course, that would have worked if the site was minimal, but as soon as the web popularized, the demand for maintenance of the sites was, of course, growing. And then we had the dynamic websites. And they are called dynamic for a good reason, because, as I said, it was a little bit tedious to maintain this content every time, take the page, modify the content, and send it back to the server via FileZilla, for example. At the time, I guess, there was a different software, but, the protocol we use is the file transfer protocol. So, but that was tedious. That was too much work and too static, right? We needed a little bit more of dynamism, and the technologies like PHP, Java Server Page, ASP appeared. And these guys were allowing the companies at the time to, in a dynamic way, create these pages. So we no longer needed to process, in a raw manner, speed some content in HTML and then upload the page again. But we just could create a database, put the content in a table, and then link or process that content based on the user's requests. What page do you want? And then the server side would just do all these magical things, the processing of data, and a process, of course, the new pages in your website all automatically. So that was a great step. In the 2000s, of course, the dot-com bubble and everything went just crazy, and the web popularized so freaking fast. And we just kept on evolving, and web applications were not an exception, of course. So it was great, but we had the dynamic websites. But in 2007, a guy came up with an awesome product called the iPhone, in which you had a lot of power in that little device. And what's most important, you could actually treat it like a computer, like in terms of web browsing. So people start paying more attention and visiting the web from a mobile device. And the same guy at Apple just comes the year after, and with an iPad, which has it's an awesome device with a different screen resolution, quite different actually. And we had suddenly at least three totally different devices and screens. And that created a problem, because we had our awesome web applications, dynamic web applications, but as soon as these new devices, new screens appear, then we have our web applications start not really crashing, but some of them, yes, but in terms of design, not looking really good. So, for instance, if you developed your design of your site for targeting a monitor of 21 inches or targeting a laptop 16 inches, for example, that same website was not really functional, or not really looking good on the mobile device, on an iPhone or an iPad. So we needed something else, right? At the time, Twitter was also popular already, and they came with a brilliant idea. They said, it's the era of different devices, different screens, so let's give developers and web enthusiasts a technology so they are more productive. And they came up with Twitter Bootstrap. And that's a technology, a front-end technology, that allows you to create your styling of your website for you code only once. And the device is almost guaranteed that it's going to work. In terms of design, it's going to fit in almost any device. So that was a great step, very popular technology that up to this day is widely used. Of course, HTML, CSS, they are part of standardizations. Every now and then they come with the new standards based on what they see in the world, based on what the big companies request to them. It's actually called the WW3. Let me just go with that for you. The standard W3C, I guess it is consortium.org. Yeah, this is the one, W3C. So these guys are the responsible ones for maintaining the web technologies. So if you want to know the latest developments in HTML technology, in CSS technology, this is a place to be. That being said, they are constantly evolving. Sometimes they are a little bit slower than other technologies, but it's worth to have a look and keep updated with the new changes, so you see what's available in terms of HTML or for your style in terms of CSS. Okay, what you see here, Sass and Less, is basically, these are again tools. The web becomes a little bit more powerful in terms of the tooling, and we want to be productive as web developers. And these standardizations become a little bit more complex. I mean, they are more powerful now, but the amount of that you can do, it's massive. So these tools are preprocessors of CSS preprocessors that allow me to be more productive. They take complex things and they make it easy for me. Okay. Unfortunately, this is outside the scope of this course, but I highly recommend you to just have a look whenever you have some time and apply, if possible, and play with these technologies. Okay. So this is what where we live now after the different screens, different devices revolution. We are having very powerful devices in our pockets, so they can handle a lot. And by that, well, a lot of people is just realizing that they can handle a lot, and it's like, why don't we? The paradigm is changing, and or was changing at the time. I'm talking about the last from 2010 and now. They are the developer, the web, basically the developers around the world thinking, or software engineers thinking, well, why can't we just move the logic from the server? Because the server is if you request something, the server is having the heavy duties in terms of processing whatever you are requesting. So these software engineers said, why don't we just move part of this logic, or most of this logic, to the client side, since the client side nowadays is very powerful. Everything becomes basically more powerful. So they came with frameworks at the front level. They came with frameworks that work based on an SPA, and an SPA stands for Single Page Applications. In the past, when you requested a website, the first time, it's going to be the index.html. That was the page. And then if you requested something on a different page or in the menu, for example, I'm in a home page, and then I go to the, you name it, the about page, that's a totally different resource that you are being completely loading on the browser side. Well, actually depends on the methodology, how you exactly load it, but mostly that was the case in the past. What we do now with SPAs is even though you have still the menu and the link changes on the browser, you only load the technology like Angular, the framework, and the whole page that you see, the whole application, basically in the beginning, only once. And the whole application works from there alone. So you don't have to constantly talk to the server for the pages every time you move or navigate through your application. That doesn't happen anymore in the modern world of SPAs, and that's kind of the brilliant thing about this. You know, the client can do a lot of things. It doesn't mean that there are no disadvantages on this approach, but it helps us greatly just delegating a lot of front-end processes to the browser. So yeah, here I have just 3 examples: the Backbone.js, Ember, and AngularJS. Well, it says AngularJS, but it's not called like that anymore. That was just in the beginning, the first version, I think. And but now it's called just Angular, simpler. So if you Google Angular, then you are just good to go. AngularJS is just the old version of the same framework. And yeah, if you're asking why we are studying Angular, and well, we started this course a while ago, and it was the most popular one, as simple as that. But I think it shouldn't be fair if I do not name React.js, which is also, well, it's not exactly a framework, but it's a library. And but it's becoming more, today it's more popular than Angular. The learning curve is actually easier. But well, since this is an Angular course, we're going to learn Angular framework. And yeah, basically that's the presentation, the introduction. That was only an introduction about what we are going to, why are we here in terms of web applications and what we're going to study. If you want to know a little bit more about this story, the evolution of web applications, or web development, better said, it's here's the link. Thank you.